Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSPiz. Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 29th of July 2024. I just want to explain what went on yesterday. My first video of the day was restricted, so I couldn't release that. I released it to my members only while I appealed the restriction. During that time, I did a live stream and just used the content from that video and did it on the live stream so I could get that content out to everyone on the day that it was needed. This morning, YouTube have lifted the restriction because I appealed it, but sometimes it takes 1 day, sometimes it takes 3 days. And of course, by the time they lift the appeal, it's not newsworthy, right? So I've now just released that video to the general public. Someone here says, couldn't see yesterday's first one as you want me to be a member. That's a goodbye from me. I'm 80-year-old veteran disabled and you want me to pay for watching your channel. You never had to pay to get news from us vets when we served. I'm sorry for the confusion. I did try and explain this. Wasn't asking anyone to become a member at all. I've never done that. You're very welcome to become members and I'm super grateful if you do. All of my news content is thrown out for everyone to see, but sometimes YouTube throttles that content by restricting it, usually automatically because there's something that they think is a problem on it, but it's not, because these automatic bots scrape the videos and they make mistakes and I have to appeal them and then the appeal gets overturned. But in that process, what happens is they then throttle the video. They don't throw it out on only half the amount of people get to see it. They don't have any adverts on them, so it's completely demonetized, so on and so forth. And so, you know, I appeal that and that's what happens. So it is there for you and it's now definitely there for you, but it was there on the live. I wanted to make sure I got that out yesterday, which is why I did the live. I'm so sorry if there's any confusion. Please, you feel free to go and watch it now, although it will be a day late. Okay, now on to what has happened over the last 24 hours. As according to the Ukrainian General Staff, you can find all the caveats to these claims in the description below. They apply as ever. 1,310 personnel losses, a very heavy number of losses there. That's higher than we've seen for some time. Not massively higher, but still over the 1,300 mark. 12 tanks losses over the daily average. 8 armoured personnel vehicles is under the daily average. 74 artillery systems is a massive number. That's just huge. About 4 times the daily average. I wonder if that's because that dumping of video, that montage with all of those artillery pieces was dumped. I don't. That would strike me as being a little bit odd, because I'm not sure that the general staff wait for the stuff that goes out publicly. The way I understand it is the units provide that data to the general staff and then later on things are put together for social media. So I would be surprised if the general staff saw an uptick in artillery systems, because that one video was placed where Andrew Perpetua had huge amounts of artillery on it, but it could be. I don't know, it could be. 2 multiple launch rocket systems, 62 vehicles and fuel tanks, very high in that category, and 19 pieces of special equipment. Is that the record? I'm not sure. It's very high in special equipment losses. So we can see a challenging day for the Russians indeed. The question is always how bad is it for the Ukrainians? And the next question is then, how are the Russians able to sustain these losses? Are they able to sustain them? Does it change their behavior? What are their stockpiles looking like? What are their production capacities looking like? And indeed, Perun, whose channel is a must-watch on a weekly basis, every Saturday brings out an incredibly interesting synopsis on some different topic. Well, this latest one that he talked about, it's all the way back here actually. No, it's not. It's all the way back here. I will look into this in a little while. But he looks at the Ukrainian equipment losses and resupplies. So how able are the Ukrainians able to resupply from their losses, and what happens to the makeup of their equipment? And this is something I've talked about a lot recently, because I have said you are starting to see more and more Western equipment on the Ukrainian loss list, because I think they have either or both cycled through all their older Soviet kit, and you're starting to get onto Western kit, so they don't have the stockpiles of Soviet kit, or they do have the stockpiles of Soviet kit, but they would prefer to use a Western kit because it has higher survivability. Indeed, well, actually, let's go to that now. So this is an example that Perun looks at just with regard to infantry fighting vehicles. Now, I haven't finished watching this video yet, so there's probably an awful lot of other nuggets in here, but we'll just look at this.
What you're looking at on screen there now is a chart showing Ukrainian visually confirmed losses for 3 infantry fighting vehicles: the BMP-1, BMP-2, and the American Bradley. I chose these 3 vehicles because the BMP-1 and BMP-2 are the most common infantry fighting vehicles in Ukrainian service, with the BMP-2 obviously being the somewhat better vehicle, while the Bradley was selected because it's the only Western infantry fighting vehicle where the number of visually confirmed losses, which is approaching 100 at this point, gives us a sample size large enough for this exercise to potentially be worth doing. The colour coding on the bar splits those losses into 3 types. Blue are those that appear to have been at least slightly damaged, orange are those that have been damaged and then either abandoned or captured. Abandoned vehicles may or may not be recovered by either side, but the key point is the crew may have had more chance to survive, while the red represents those that are classified as destroyed. Just in case that previous graph was a little hard to read because more BMP-1s have been lost than the other 2 types, this is it expressed as a percentage of losses for each platform. Immediately you'll see something interesting. The distribution for the BMP-1 and BMP-2, so more than 600 vehicles combined across those 2 categories, are pretty close. In both cases, the blue bar is relatively small and the destroyed percentage is around 80%. Meanwhile, for the Bradley, you see a lot less red and a lot more blue. And while the difference between blue and orange might matter if you're concerned with whether or not the side permanently lost the vehicle as a result of the engagement, from a crew survivability perspective, it might be useful to group them together as non-catastrophic losses. And that's exactly what you can see here, with all those damaged, abandoned and captured categories grouped together into the green bar, while the destroyed vehicles are marked in red. I need to stress this is in no way a perfect proxy for crew survivability, but the pattern there is fairly stark. If you are in a Ukrainian BMP-1 or BMP-2 and you become a visually confirmed loss, there's about an 80% chance that you're in a vehicle that is going to be thoroughly destroyed. If you're in a Bradley, then statistically the destroyed percentage drops below 50%. That means that if this was a perfect proxy, and everyone in a damaged vehicle tended to survive while everyone in a destroyed vehicle tended to not, your odds of survival for those experienced IFV operators or the infantry carried would be more than 2.5 times higher in an American Bradley than it would be in a BMP-1 or 2. And that's
Okay, so that's pretty self-explanatory. You are more likely to survive if you're in a Bradley. We've heard this anecdotally from people serving in Bradleys or on the front line, Ukrainians. I've seen plenty of footage of people running away from BMPs that are fundamentally disassembled and thought, how the hell have you survived from that? So there is a survivability in these catastrophically destroyed BMPs as well. But the claim is that is greater for the Bradleys. And also, you are just going to be more able to recover the Bradleys and fix them back up than you are the BMP 1s and 2s. So I think that's a really interesting statistic, and it's probably a good foundation to then going into having a look at this loss list from Andrew Perpetua. Again, we're looking at a sort of 3 to 1, 2.5, 3 to 1 losses for Russian losses to Ukrainian losses. When we look at the Ukrainian equipment, we are seeing some surveillance and comm staff, a couple of boats, and then some artillery, a Bogdana thrown in there, damaged by not sure actually, just damaged there. That's the indigenously constructed self-propelled howitzer, 3 other howitzers and a self-propelled gun as well. Most of those damaged. And then we come on to infantry fighting vehicles. So interestingly here, we have a few more BMPs thrown in. We have 2 destroyed BMPs and a damaged BMP and a destroyed Bradley. So Bradleys, they have lost or damaged up to possibly over 100 Bradleys now. I would hope that they're going to be given a whole new batch of those soon, as the Americans are potentially ramping up to give a load of aid packages before the November elections. Then we have some other bits and pieces, but again, Max Pro, Humvee. We are generally seeing more Western kit on these loss lists than old Soviet era kit for the previously aforementioned reasons. Now, when we come to the Russian losses, we have an airport radar. We have 2 Su-30 SM jets, 1 destroyed, 1 damaged. They are from the Saki Air Base in Crimea, from the strikes that you can see on satellite imagery now, from the strikes that took place on the night of the 26th. So that's incredibly high value equipment lost there. And then a few artillery pieces, quite a number of tanks there, were about 8 tanks, half of them abandoned and destroyed, range of tanks there. Then BMPs, most of those destroyed, looks to be about just over 2/3 destroyed, rather than damaged. BMP 1s, 2s and BTRs there. APCs, most 3/4 of those abandoned or destroyed. MTLBs, BTRs, Tigers and whatnot. And then other bits and pieces, trucks, a lot of ATVs here. So your golf buggies, a good 6 of those taken out. And then another 4-wheeler, another type of buggy. Then we have your usual motorbikes and loafs and all sorts. So the Russians are just losing a tremendous amount of kit compared to the Ukrainians on a daily basis. It's been a bad week, I think, for Russian kit loss, including those top of the ticket pieces, like in this case an airport radar and 2 Su-30 SM. So talking about personnel losses, remember that I reported on Mali, what happened in Mali with 80 Wagner soldiers killed and another 15 taken prisoner, and that would have hurt them. Well, that is not only is there video evidence of that. I mean, I've seen the pretty horrific video evidence of that ambush, but now Wagner-linked channels are releasing messages. Here's one acknowledging the loss of large numbers of personnel in Mali. There are few details, except that the mercenaries were commanded by Sergei Shevchenko with a call sign Pond, and he was killed. There are claims that one of the commanders from Bakhmut and Soledar was killed. One of Prigozhin's buddies was killed, and also the guy in charge of the Grey Zone Telegram channel, which is a Wagner megaphone on social media, was also killed. Those are the rumours, we'll see. But bad losses for Wagner outside of Ukraine. And there were these rumours that have been floating around that Ukraine were involved. Ukrainian special forces were involved in that ambush. And since then, the Tuareg, is it CSP, DPA, CSP? I don't know. Whoever they are were offering because there were 15 captives there, were offering their POWs to the Ukrainians, and they were also declaring their solidarity with Ukraine. So interesting parallels going on there. Now, claimed ATACMS strike on a Russian training ground took place yesterday in Luhansk. Strike was carried out on a rear military training ground where servicemen of the 228th Motorized Rifle Regiment and the 90th Tank Division of the Russian Armed Forces were stationed. The servicemen were forming up before being sent to reinforce the forward positions of the 228th Motorized Rifle Regiment in the area of the settlement of Ocheratina. The strike was carried out using ATACMS ballistic missiles from 110 kilometers away. So these are going to be the 300-kilometer ATACMS. Apparently, 19 of them were killed, 71 of them injured, says this source, says Special Curse on Cat. Igor Shushko says, likewise, 71 injured, 19 killed. So that's the claim going around at the moment. So that's a significant strike on a training facility in the Russian rear. Now, when I say things like the GUR, Ukrainian intelligence say that, for example, the Tu-22 strategic bomber was struck in Olenia Air Base, 1,800 kilometers from the front line. And I report that and say, look, take it with a pinch of salt, but that's a claim from the Ukrainian intelligence. And then Tezi here, who is basically a Russian shill, says zero evidence, satellite images don't corroborate, classic Ukrainian intelligence. And I'm like, there are no satellite images yet, so just to get it straight, you'd rather not believe the Ukrainians, even though there are huge amounts of data to suggest their claims are far more believable than the Russians. Got it. Okay. So the typical Russian troll claim is that, there's no evidence, it didn't happen. Rather than to look at inductive reasoning here, which is essentially, if you're a betting man, you look at the form. Okay, but if you're a philosophical man, you talk about inductive reasoning, you talk about Bayesian probability analyses, and you say, right, what are the prior probabilities for the Ukrainian claims being true? And you could then, you could compare that to the prior probabilities of Russian claims being true. So you say, right, before we look at any evidence, the Ukrainian claims are generally they generally end up being true, right? So in other words, if I'm a betting man, like I've got pretty good reason to bet that the subsequent Ukrainian claim concerning a strike on any given airfield is going to be somewhat correct, right? And then we look at the Russian claims, you're like, oh yeah, no, they always lie. So we've got good rationale for disbelieving the Russian claims and believing the Ukrainian claims. It's why I've been it's not why I've been doing this. It's what I've been doing here with this first video for over 2 years now. So if you're a Russian troll, Tezi, classic Russian troll, comes along and says zero evidence, I say, look, I don't need evidence yet to think that this is probably true. But I will always qualify that with a modal inference there. So it's probably true. And then lo and behold, the next day or 2 days later, it appears that 1222 M3 aircraft was damaged in an attack on Olenia Air Base on July 27th. However, higher quality images are needed for better confirmation. This image unfortunately doesn't confirm it yet, but there's no satellite evidence, therefore it didn't happen. It's not true. I'd say it probably was true. A couple of days later, there is some satellite evidence to suggest it is true. So I was justified in my prior claim, and you weren't. So stick that in your pipe and smoke it. Tezi. So Saki Airfield, two jets were claimed to have been taken out. One destroyed, one damaged. There's now thought to be a sky radar was also destroyed, and 2 personnel perished and 4 injured. That then goes back to Andrew Perpetua's loss list today, where he says 1 destroyed Su 30 SM and 1 so 1 was destroyed, 1 was damaged, and then where is he? And then we had the radar taken out as well. So that's where he's gaining that information from. There are some satellite images that also support those claims that I showed you yesterday, but it's just the addition of that radar. So Special Curse on Cat talks about this again regarding the strike on Saki, Novofedorivka military airfield, from the Dossier Shipiona, whose information is quite regularly confirmed after some time. On the night of the 25th to 6th, a strike was carried out on Saki Airfield, location of 43rd Independent Naval Assault Aviation Regiment. So these are naval Su-30s. The strike was carried out using 8 ATACMS ballistic missiles, 2 of which were shot down, and another fell in a field north of the airfield. So that's a claim from the Russians. Interesting if they are managing to shoot down these ATACMS. As a result of the strike, 2 fighter jets were destroyed. The Nebo radar station was destroyed, and among the personnel, 2 were killed, 4 were injured. So that Nebo is that one of those large sort of spinning radar systems that oops, I've now thrown my mouse across the room. So that's an expensive piece of kit, and obviously 2 jets. To lose 2 jets is also a real kick in the teeth for the Russians. Anyway, moving on to distance strikes, it was fairly quiet for the Ukrainians. 9 out of 10 Shaheeds shot down. 1 single KH-59 cruise missile was also shot down. I think that's the only one, as in 1 out of 1. And 9 out of 10 Shaheeds, but I could be wrong there. So nothing too much to report from inside Ukraine. Obviously, something might have been hit by that one drone that got through. 41 attack drones were used in 6 regions of Russia overnight. Possibly more drones than that, but you kind of find out the numbers by what the Russians claim they've shot down. Causing fires at 2 electrical substations in the Oriol and Belgorod regions. Another substation in Kursk was hit by a drone a few hours ago. Meanwhile, the Russian Ministry of Defense reported a successful operation of air defense systems, claiming the destruction of 39 drones, 19 in Kursk, 9 in Belgorod, 5 in Bryansk, 3 in Voronezh, and 3 in Leningrad. So lots of videos of things on fire. Lots of things have been hit. 2 substations caught fire in Oriol and Belgorod regions, as was previously mentioned. And then also, so UK hit a power station, so I presume that's a substation, in Oriol, and 1 in Tomarovka in Belgorod region, and in Voronezh, a utility infrastructure object in Gazoprovod was damaged. So there will be more information, no doubt, coming out about this, but the Ukrainians have been busy overnight trying to take out energy infrastructure for the Russians. Some of that will be aimed more specifically at the military, like yesterday, the hitting of the oil depot that supposedly the oil depot that supplies the Russian military. But the substations last night could more be trying to take out localized power infrastructure to create a discontent with the war among the population, exactly like the Russians do on the Ukrainians. There's this long-running argument as to whether energy infrastructure, general energy infrastructure within a country, are bona fide military targets. If you go back to the Second World War, you'd say very much yes. But actually, if you look at the kind of military handbooks for the Americans, that it is, I think they say they generally are. Like you can make arguments both ways, but energy infrastructure is seen as, you look at the Ukrainian energy infrastructure that's been hit, that is incapacitating the Ukrainian industrial capacity. That will then stop Ukraine being able to make money through GDP being affected, but also stop them being able to make weapons as well. Now, on the other hand, yeah, it affects civilians, and you could argue it is also, like, I'm sure you can make a case for it being a war crime. And there are, and I think there probably are elements of what the Russians have done with these strikes on energy infrastructure that do look more war crimey. Some of those massive energy power stations, that have been in overtly supplying. My MS brain has got the better of me this morning. Supplying these civilian areas, and you can make a case that's just not on. But at the same time, even if they are overtly supplying civilian areas, you can make a case that they are also taking out the country's ability to make money and connected to the GDP and so on and so forth. So yeah. Let me know what you think below as to whether either side striking energy infrastructure is problematic or it's within the confines of military objectives. The Kyiv Independent, moving on to other bits and pieces, Kyiv Independent reports that fighting in Donetsk is, quote, extremely challenging. Well, this is from Zelensky himself. And Russian forces have continued to focus a majority of their offensive operations in the area or in the direction of Pokrovsk, according to Zelensky. Now, I talked about this last night in my mapping update, that I think things are really difficult on that eastern front line, particularly around Pokrovsk. The flip side is that at some point they're going to meet the actual fortifications that have been built, rather than taking this territory, and that, thinking that might go on forever, and then they take Pokrovsk. They will come across the major fortifications that I think have been built between Pokrovsk and where the Russians are at the moment. On the other hand, the Ukrainians are really low on numbers, and they're waiting for those mobilized troops to finish their training. You don't want to rush them through, because then you're committing untrained soldiers to the front line. But you also desperately need soldiers, and you've got people that haven't rotated in however long, and it's just really desperate for the Ukrainians. The flip side to that is that it's really desperate for the Russians, and the Russians are happy to throw in untrained soldiers to the front line and send them to their almost certain deaths. They have less value for their human lives, for their personnel. So that gives the Russians a sort of advantage there, although that advantage will translate into a disadvantage later, as they've just cycled through far more people than the Ukrainians, and get left in a situation where they are struggling to sustain those losses from both a personnel point of view and an equipment point of view. So it is just the end result. The end conclusion here is it's really, really bloody difficult for both sides. Conditions are terrible for the Russians, but the Ukrainians are just holding on with the I would assume the bare minimum of what they can. Now, going back to what happened in Mali, it's interesting here that Ukraine and Azawad, the operators of attack drones of the 13th Brigade of NSU Chartia, congratulated the Tuareg warriors of Azawad on the defeat of the Russian invaders. So there is this connection, there is this solidarity between what those Malian rebels have achieved yesterday, and here they're given some props by the Ukrainian 13th Brigade there. Anyway, moving on, Adam Kinzinger having a right go at Douglas McGregor. So Douglas McGregor is the sort of person that Russian trolls say, oh, you should listen more to Douglas McGregor and Scott Ritter and Jackson Hinkle. You're like, no, all those three people have been so roundly and soundly debunked that their names are worth very little now. At the beginning of the war, they were just mentioned in every other comment. If you remember reading through the threads on, say, my videos, if you've been with me for the long haul, every other Russian troll comment was, oh, this is a load of nonsense. You should listen to Douglas McGregor. You should listen to Scott Ritter. And then as this war's gone on and those people have just been found out to be complete frauds and shills for Russia, paid almost certainly directly by the Kremlin, you see this far less and less. And like when you see the sort of thing that Douglas McGregor says on the socials, breaking 18 SAS members killed in Ukraine, 18 members of British Special Air Service and French Army soldiers were killed in a strike on Odessa. The retired Spanish Army Colonel Pedro Baños said, quote, there was an attack on Odessa in which at least 18 members of the British Special Air Service SAS were killed. On the YouTube channel Canal del Coronel, according to the colonel, another 25 members of the British Special Air Service were injured, and they tell me that French soldiers died. They are not mercenaries. These are not mercenaries who are French. No, these are soldiers of the French army, he added. At the same time, a retired colonel in the Spanish army did not specify when exactly the attack on Odessa was carried out. So Douglas McGregor just spreading this stuff. Now, I'm not saying that hasn't happened. Interesting to look into that. And my thoughts are that special forces of most major allied nations are operating in Ukraine and have done since pretty much the beginning of the war. They were there before the war broke out, and they'll be there now, and they will be certainly training. I don't think they'll be involved in any missions at all, but they'll be helping to prepare for missions for the Ukrainians, is my opinion, and it's slightly more than an opinion as well. It's they are there anyway. I don't think that's particularly controversial, since the SAS are operating in many countries around the world, all day long, every day of the year, right? This is just what they do. They are part of our influence operations abroad, so on and so forth. Whether they have been killed in Odessa to the degree that is suggested by Douglas McGregor, I don't know. I find it somewhat unlikely, since we go back to what's your form. Douglas McGregor's form, if he's a horse, he's lost like 20 out of the last 20 races. You're like, okay, should we bet on him this time? Yeah, probably not. Don't cry wolf and all that. So I think this is a low probability claim. And Adam Kinzinger, former Republican lawmaker in the US, says this is a lie. To watch a former colonel, so Douglas McGregor, collapse into a collaborator and traitor is a sad thing to see. Interestingly, Douglas McGregor is not allowed to use the title colonel anymore. That's been stripped away from him because of his highly controversial positioning and claims. Right, Washington Post is claiming that F-16s will be in Ukraine in a few weeks to bolster air defences. This is in line with what we've been hearing for the last few months, that they will get there by the end of summer. The planes will shoot down missiles, drones and enemy aircraft instead of attacking Russian ground forces and other military targets near the front line. Again, this is what is generally accepted, or most people are claiming, I've been claiming this, is that they will not be used near the front line, too risky. They'll be used to shoot down cruise missiles and Shahed drones and whatnot as part of the air defense, really, of Ukraine. And that will be super useful. It'll also give them flying time, the pilots flying time in a real war zone. And they'll be getting used to how to operate, and then getting the logistics on the ground and the maintenance crews used to operating, and then making sure that their own air bases are themselves safe. And in fact, there is a claim, I've got it from my military aid section, but the claim is that the Russians are very closely watching all the airfields ready for when the F-16s get there, so they know when they get there. And this is obviously what the Russians are going to be doing anyway. But yes, my thoughts are that they will be used at the beginning very much as air defense, keep it safe, and make sure that those planes and crews are protected. Right, incredibly, another dam has broken in Russia. Russian media report the dam has broken in Belomoro-Balachitsky channel in Karelia, and I reported another dam breaking yesterday from somewhere else. According to them, a temporary lintel was installed during the reconstruction, and that was washed away. Water swept away several houses with people in. In fact, I think there are 7 people missing. Between the locks of the White Sea-Baltic Canal, the water washed away a temporary coffer dam being installed during reconstruction. So this is, I don't know, is it the 6th dam or something that is... This goes beyond being an anomaly, and this becomes a problem. Yes, you could say it's a climate-related issue, that maybe there are lots of issues that reflect what's going on, irrespective of the poor levels of maintenance or whatever you might also claim. But then, is this happening in other countries to the same degree it's happening in Russia? Is Russia the only country that is suffering from climate-related dam issues to this kind of level? Or is there something else happening, such as just endemic corruption over decades and poor maintenance because as a result of that, and then money being poured left, right and centre into Russia's war effort rather than into where it should be, which is the people of Russia. So yeah, it's just incredible that yet another dam has broken. Right, and then we see this. This is just very weird. So just to let you know, the context of this is that there was a big naval parade that didn't include the Black Sea Fleet for the first time like ever. Yesterday, was it? Day before and yesterday. And you had Putin and Belousov going and checking out all of these Black Sea, all of these naval ships and whatnot. And look at what the new salute is for the Russian naval personnel. And just think about it. So look at their arm move. I mean, okay, it's a closed fist, but if they had an open hand, this is the Nazi salute. Like, it's just absolutely incredible that they would choose that as their new salute. Like, what is going on? So Russia is the country that always complains that everyone else that they're fighting against is a Nazi, Ukraine-Nazis, etc., etc. And yet everything they do is fascistic. Like, everything they do is ultra-nationalist. And they are, you know, you find these soldiers fighting for Wagner who are covered in Nazi tattoos. You're like, it's just incredible. And then you're like, oh, I'll tell you what would be a good idea. Let's create a new salute that looks almost identical to the Nazi salute. Yeah, great idea. Yeah, brilliant. No one will think anything ill of that, will they? No. I mean, whatever. Just goodness. Right. Thank you for listening. Take care, guys. Speak soon. Toodle pips.